What's up, guys? I wanted to do an update video, how my February has been going as far as books, and I've had a really good reading month so far. First of all is Death Cult by Janelle Shiki. This is a self-pub horror book. This is, of course, Death Cult. Everything you want to think about that. Probably trigger warnings. Think Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and you're in the realm of what this book is. I enjoyed it. There were some parts that may be uncomfortable, but I think that's what the author was going for. So that's definitely not a strike against it. Small town, desert town, takes captives. There's a cult in there that has some not very good connections with the other world, and they like to make sacrifices. That's what this is. So if that sounds like it's up your alley, a horror that is truly disturbing at times, gory as it can be. When the people ride into town, there's a severed human arm laying in the road. And that's just the least of the horrific things that happens in this book. So, if that's something you're interested in, check Death Cult out. Next, and this isn't in any particular order. In fact, it may also almost be the reverse order of how I read them. But anyway, Children of Gods and Fighting Men. This is by Shauna Lawless. This is one of those books that I unintentionally, and I stress unintentionally, DNF'd a while back, probably over a year ago. I started reading it, and one thing led to another, and I picked something else up for whatever reason. It wasn't because I wasn't enjoying the book, just for whatever reason that I can't even remember now, I picked something else up. But I had the page marked, and I went back, and I began to look over it, and I said, I need to get back into this book. And so I did. And a very enjoyable book. Something that I'll say about this, and if you go on Goodreads and read what other people think, most of the time, most people agree that it's a very well-written book. Very beautiful prose. All of that is fine. All of that is great. If action, and what it is it's kind of an Irish folklore. It's set in our real world in just before 1000 AD. So you have Irish folklore, you have Norse people and mythology and things of that nature all kind of coming together in this story. Something that I really enjoyed, it's historical fantasy. Some people say that they read this and they realize that historical fantasy just isn't their thing. Nothing wrong with the book itself, just historical fantasy isn't their thing. The few historical fantasies that I have read, I've enjoyed. I gave this 4 stars because it's well written. The characters, there's 2 main POVs, and they're interesting, they're intriguing. I continue, the entire time I read it, I wanted to continue on. I never got bored with the characters. A book like this with Vikings and sorcerers, because that's one thing that this is really about, is almost like an ancient feud between sorcerers and things of that nature. You would probably expect a little bit more action. And it really wasn't. There really wasn't much action. There is a building up throughout the book to a battle. And the battle scene, I would say, was good and was pretty satisfying. But it's a lot of dialogue, which is okay. A lot of setting the context, building the story. Again, an enjoyable read. Just not a lot of things happening, not a lot of big moments going on. It's just kind of smooth sailing throughout the book. So if that's something you were interested in, I would recommend that you pick it up. Next, and this is book 2 in the series that I'm reading, the Echo Saga. This is The Empire of Dirt by Philip Quantrill. And I don't know what to say other than I am really enjoying this particular series. Philip Quantrill is a new author for me. I know many people have enjoyed this series. It's a 9-book series, kind of divided up in, I think, 3 different trilogies. And this is the second book of the first arc, or the first trilogy. I don't know that they're technically trilogies, but there's 3 arcs throughout the 9 books. And so this is the second book of the first arc. Yeah, so if you want to read dragon riding, which there's some of that here, there's multiple POVs. You have different groups going different places. There's a looming battle based off of a dark prophecy. All the things we fantasy nerds love to read about. You also have someone discovering dragon riding. You have elves, you have dwarves, you have all of those things. It's a fun read. In fact, really, I would say what this reminds me of, for me personally, and I don't know if everybody would agree with this, but as I've been reading this, I'm reminded of a lot of the Bound and the Broken. Not that there's any connections in the story or anything like copying one another, just that's the same feel I get. If you're a fan of The Bound and the Broken by Ryan Cahill, I think you'll be a fan of this as well. Everything's been satisfying. I talked about a lack of action in the last book. There is no lack of action in these books, but there's also no lack of deep character moments. You have gray morality, but you also have people who try not to be like that. So again, it's been a wonderful read, and I look forward to reading book 2 in March. Book 3, excuse me, in March. In fact, I have it on my shelf here somewhere waiting to go. Then there is Before They Are Hanged. Now, I am one of the ones who, I've been doing this for close to 3 years now, and I've never really read, up until last year, I never really read Joe Abercrombie. And I would say that's a mistake. I've actually did an update in a short on YouTube concerning this book, and I won't repeat everything I said there, but I read book 1, The Blade itself, and that for me was a fine book. It was okay. It was great character moments, great character development, but there really wasn't any story. Not really. And then you get to this one, and as a lot of people like to say, well, the first book was like an extended prologue, and I agree with that, because this is where the story picks up. And like I said, I enjoyed book 1 as far as the characters go. No story, but the characters. But this is a fantastic story. You can see my kind of the yellowing of the pages. That's how I bought it from Books A Million. When I bought it, I actually asked them, hey, you see these pages are yellow, but halfway up. And could you give me a discount on the book? They said, no discount. Bought it anyway. So that's the story of this. But I enjoyed this book a lot. It makes me so excited to read more Joe Abercrombie. In fact, I will be finishing this trilogy in March as well. Then I read Lightfall by Ed Crocker. Now, I had a bit of the first 25%, probably not quite 25%, but the first 20% or so, I really wasn't into the story. But that was my fault. And I'll tell you why it's my fault. I don't really read synopsis. I don't really listen to a lot of reviews on books before I start them, because I have listened to things or read things in the past, and it spoiled things I didn't want to know about. So I have, for the past couple of years, absolutely stopped reading synopses of books before I go into them. I hear chatter of what people like and what people don't like, and I make my decision on reading based off that. Well, someone said that this is vampires versus werewolves, and I said, hey, that in a fantasy setting, and I said, hey, I'm all for that. That's what I want to read. And when I say vampires versus werewolves, I still keep in my mind traditional vampires and werewolves. Horror. That's not what this is. Not to say there weren't some intense scenes. There were. However, this is not your traditional vampire story, your traditional werewolf story. In fact, I went into this probably thinking this was more of a medieval type setting, and it's not. Again, my fault, because I didn't read what it was about. So my expectations were not met when I started. I thought about DNFing, but I didn't. I continued on. One of the reasons I continued on is because I'm buddy reading this with a couple of other guys, and we're supposed to talk about it in the next month or two, and I didn't want to be the bad buddy, so I kept reading it, and I'm glad I did. I hope you haven't stopped this video now or before now, because I enjoyed this book. In fact, I enjoyed this book so much I haven't really been able to stop thinking about it. So in this world, there are no mortals, there are no humans, which I feel like kind of takes away from what would be horror elements, because if vampires aren't hunting humans, werewolves aren't hunting humans, that kind of takes away that. So also, there is there's a magic system, and I'm not the biggest fan of magic systems all the time. That's kind of made me not be a Brandon Sanderson super fan, though I've enjoyed some Sanderson books and things that he's done. I don't love magic system, hard magic system. I enjoy soft magic system. I enjoy the magic just being there. It doesn't make sense. Who cares? Is magic in the world? Well, this is a magic system based on blood. There's different types of blood that you can drink for the vampires, and that gives you different abilities. There's a class system. The lowest class gets the most basic blood that doesn't really do anything for you, except keep you alive, but you still age if you're a vampire. Then there's more different types of blood that the middle class drink. There's the best bloods that the upper class drinks, and that gives them powers, and that gives them all sorts of things. So it was kind of not really confusing, but it took me a bit to get into it. But there is a mystery. There is things going on behind the scenes that a murder mystery brings to light, factions, rebellions, all things like that. And I was hooked by 50% through. Ed Crocker did a great job. He did a great job, not that he intended to do this, but for me starting off not enjoying it as much, to end up enjoying it as much as I did, I feel like that's talent to be able to pull me into the story when I wasn't already pulled in by the first couple of chapters. So anyway, highly recommend this particular book, and I look forward. This is the first book in the Everlands series. I don't know when book 2 comes out. I assume next year. I look forward, or hopefully next year. I look forward to picking that up. The last thing that I read, Orders of Magnitude by Yuval Cordova. I hope I pronounced that name right. And this short novella, sci-fi, religious sci-fi horror, because it has to do with going to the moon. It has to do with futuristic a society. It has to do with the Roman Catholic Church having quite a bit of power, enough power that they can send military to the moon, and it has to do with possibly demonic possession. It's wild, and it's one of my favorite novellas, at least, that I've read. I can't recommend it highly enough. The feeling of dread going towards, once the people got to the moon, getting towards this thing that is going on, and this mystery, this what's behind the scenes, the dread mounting up to that point was fantastic. Please read this novella. So that's how my month has gone so far. I have enjoyed reading so much this month, and I'm excited about continuing a few things throughout the rest of them. I'm still reading By Blood, by Salt by J.L. Odom, set in the desert. I'm not even going to try to describe it right now. I'm only about 25%, a little over 25% through it right now. I'm enjoying it. We'll just say that. I'm part of the way into Elements of Time. I say sometimes I'll get to reading several books at a time, and that's the way it is for me right now. I'm reading several books at a time by Sam Paisley. Kind of a modern type fantasy, set in a modern setting, little portal magic, portal fantasy, and a lot going on in that story right now. And I'm still continuing to read, about 70% through Starlight Jewel by E.L. Lyons, and enjoying it. Going into Starlight Jewel, it was a slow start for me. In fact, it was a slow 50%, I would say. The second half of this book has been a lot more my pace, and that is the reason for that is because the absence of a certain character in the back half of the book, at least so far. Nothing wrong with the character, just a little less romantic, and I'm enjoying it more in that light. So this is how my February has gone. What about you? What are you reading? What have you read? What's your plans moving forward?